1, Mr. Pat Duffy.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, including one with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency and another with the foreign ministers of Bangladesh, Sudan and Somalia. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today, including one with Mr. Attlee, President-elect of the new European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which will have its headquarters in London.
Mr. Duffy.
Did the Prime Minister note the biting comment in the Sunday Quality Press that the fast revolving door through which ex-cabinet ministers are passing towards the boards of privatised industries that they themselves have set up has become a symbol of greed in high office?
In the trough.
And as this is an entirely new development, for which and restraint are simply not enough, as we saw last week, will she consider extending to ex-ministers the same restrictions that apply to former civil servants?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the first place, there will be 15 months between Lord Young, the noble Lord Young, leaving his office and taking up his appointment. And, of course, with civil servants, the period may not be longer than that and may be shorter. But I agree with the noble Lord, the Earl of Stockton, who, when asked a similar question, said, "It is desirable and beneficial to the country that men of considerable experience should be available when they leave government to the service of industry and commerce." I quoted what the noble Lord Wilson said in similar vein last week.
Sir Anthony Nelson.
Has my right honourable friend had an opportunity to reflect on the interview which the right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, had on television?
There must be a question of which the Prime Minister has responsibility.
Question to the Prime Minister is whether she will confirm that a Conservative government will remain committed, even after the next general election, to reducing still further the direct burden of taxation on individuals, whereas the inevitable consequence of Labour policies, despite what the Leader of the Opposition said, will be to raise significantly the average burden of taxation on people in this country.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I confirm that our policy on income tax rates remains to get down the 25 pence of standard rate of income tax down to 20 as and when it is prudent to do so.
Bill Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister tell us what she's going to do now to stop inflation reaching 10%?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the policy of the right honourable gentleman, who somehow seems to believe that if you reduce interest rates, you will cure inflation, we shall maintain our policy because the interest rates of 15% will succeed in bringing down inflation.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't the Prime Minister recall telling me early last year that they were proceeding towards zero inflation? We've had 16 more months of her policies since then, and rather than proceeding towards zero, inflation is proceeding towards double figures. Apart from trying to fix the figures, what is the Prime Minister going to do to get inflation down?
Mr. Speaker, I answer the right honourable gentleman. Does the right honourable gentleman seriously maintain his position that Does the right honourable gentleman seriously maintain his ridiculous economics by saying that to get inflation down you need to cut interest rates? That would put it up to rates that Labour were used to having.
Are there any economics more ridiculous than the one that produces the lowest growth rate of the major industrialized countries, the highest inflation rate of the major industrialized countries, the worst balance of payments position of all the major industrial countries? If the right honourable lady wants to speak about ridiculous economics, let her look at herself.
And also produces and has for 3 years, the highest level of investment in industry we've ever had, the highest standard of living this country has ever known, the highest standard of social services this country has ever known, and the lowest levels of income tax in the post-war period. Yeah. All of
Mr. Simon Burns!
Does my right honourable friend share with me the misery, frustration and expense caused by squatters who occupy privately owned homes? Will she accept that providing no damage is done to securely locked houses, there is nothing the police can do before an order is got from a court? And does she not think it's time that the balance of the law was redressed to favour the innocent homeowner rather than the reprehensible activities of squatters?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman is aware, squatting which directly excludes a householder from his home is already a criminal offence. The police can act and penalties are severe, but squatting in property, residential property, which does not carry this immediate threat of causing homelessness, can only be recovered by a civil action and not by a crime. I agree with the honourable gentleman that there appears to be something wrong in this law. It should also, many of us think, that criminal offence. Appears to be something wrong in this law, so there appears to be a defect in this law, and I'm looking into the matter further.
Graham Allen.
Number 2, sir. Global warming.
Sir, there have already been several such international conferences over the last year. International initiatives on climate change are primarily dealt with through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Its support will be considered carefully and fully at the second World Climate Conference this autumn, which I hope to address.
Mr. Graham Allen.
Prime Minister may talk green, she may even dress green, but it's the same old blue policies underneath. Will the Prime Minister admit that what people at home know is that her complacency on global warming, on the depletion of the ozone layer, on the running down of our environment, on the degradation of our wildlife, has all taken place under this government? Will she now, instead of bleating at that dispatch box, will she come forward with a practical plan of action for our environment so that her last year isn't as wasted in environmental terms as her first 11 years?
Will the honourable gentleman look up the record of the last Labour government, which after a directive of 1975 from the Commission did nothing about water or beaches, did nothing even to identify, let alone clean them up. We have cleaned up 3/4 of them and have a programme to clean up the rest. That we're also doing a great deal more with rivers. We have the best record on cleanliness of rivers of any country in Europe. Perhaps he's forgotten this. We have a very good record on calling the Ozone Conference and setting the targets, and we shall have one shortly. Perhaps the honourable gentleman, instead of making those remarks, would look at his own record and see that a Labour government did nothing but cut capital expenditure and made the environment worse.
Mr. Peter Rost.
Right honourable friend, take another look at a number of reputable studies which indicate that this country can not only stabilise its greenhouse gases but actually reduce them without any financial penalty or pain, simply because through greater efficiency in the production and use of energy we can actually get a cost saving, higher productivity and a more competitive economy.
Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend is aware, I did give a certificate to a house which had very high energy and efficiency yesterday and had led the way, and it was the first one, in fact, to secure that particular certificate. I agree with him that industry has already done a great deal to improve its energy efficiency as a way of keeping down its costs and will do a good deal more, and the particular companies have done a good deal of research which will make them more energy efficient than ever before. I think that the target that we have set of getting back to 1990 levels by the year 2005 is a good one. It is the right timescale, and it has been confirmed by the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Wally.
Will the Prime Minister accept that her government's projections of CO2 emissions are in fact a gross overestimate and in fact misleading. Isn't she, despite today's green mantle, conning the British public about what she's doing on green issues? And will she give a commitment to the House that she will make available to it for full public inspection the detailed information about government scientific reports about the level of CO2 emissions which contribute to global warming?
Mr. Speaker, I noticed that the Labour Party tried to sustain that argument the other day and they were completely blown out of the water. In fact, the CBI totally agreed with our targets, and also that the target has been confirmed by Dr. Houghton, who has the best available evidence, and he said 15-year period is an appropriate timescale. It's a significant step towards reducing the rate of climate change during the next 15 years, by the end of which substantial improvement in the accuracy of the scientific assessment should be expected. This has all, in fact, been based upon sound science.
Mr. Robbins, Squire.
Friend confirm that CFCs are a greenhouse gas much more damaging in equivalent weight than CO2s, and that the steps we've taken there as a government, beating the target of Montreal Protocol, deserve praise even from the opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have indeed done that, beating the Montreal Protocol, and we hope to set new targets again at the conference which we shall hold next week. My honourable friend is quite right. CFCs are a very damaging greenhouse gas, so also is methane, and some people would wish to take as their targets not only the CO2 emissions, but the CO2 equivalent, which takes into account the CFCs and the methane gas as well.
Bill Mickey.
Which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Mickey.
Mr. Speaker, why is the Prime Minister still insisting that the National Health Service is safe in her hands when there's chronic underfunding throughout the country, and indeed in the Sheffield Area Health Authority over 1 million underfunding, which has resulted in 108 beds being closed and plans to close 2 more hospitals? Surely the Prime Minister should have the courage to accept that it's better for her to lose her face than patients to lose their lives.
For the taxpayer, under the rate of growth we've had under Conservative government, to be able to go to finance the health service from an amount of 11 billion a year in 1979 to 7 billion a year in 1979 to 29 billion a year is a great tribute both to the growth we've had under this government and to the way in which we've been able to divert quite a bit of that growth to improving the health service in a way which the Labour Party could never have done.
Sir Robert McCrindle.
Mr. Speaker, reverting to the earlier question, as some organisations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth appear to be dissatisfied with our progress on matters such as global warming and other environmental issues, does she not think the time has come when they should be asked to cost their rather more ambitious proposals? Does she agree with me that although all of us would like to see a greener environment, evidently not all of us are prepared to face the financial consequences?
Very good. Speaker, my honourable friend is quite right that to make the environment much better does cost money, whether it be in electricity or gas or whether it be in water. Of course, we should be able to have to improve and reduce the carbon dioxide emissions if we had a greater amount of nuclear energy. But those who urge us to reduce them further are often those who detest nuclear energy or those from the Labour Party who in fact want to keep all the coal mines open to in fact generate all of our electricity from coal.
Rosie Barnes. Mrs. Barnes.
I refer the Honourable Lady to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mrs. Barnes.
Given reports in today's Independent of a rift between the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Health on the timing of the introduction of the community care reforms outlined in the National Health Service and Community Care Bill, will she assure the House that if and when these reforms are introduced, their funding will be ring-fenced and she will not seek to overturn the amendment passed to this effect in another place?
Speaker, the government set out its proposals in the White Paper, and the bill, which has been extensively debated in both houses, is a major changes in community care. The planning is going ahead well, and it remains the government's intention that these changes will get underway this coming year as from April 1991. It is not universally accepted by any means that the funding should be by specific grant. Indeed, many local authorities prefer it to be in the ordinary aggregate exchequer grant and not by specific grant.
10-minute rule motion, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.